Hi everybody, welcome today to our career advising workshop for the fall semester. Appreciate you coming out today. And my name is Kim Schroeder. I'm the career advisor for the School of Library Information Science. I'm also a proud graduate of the program. So one of the things I wanted to talk about today is really how to kind of set yourself up for your ideal job. Sometimes I get resumes from people that have graduated and they say, can you look this over? And I try to always ask them, well, tell me what your ideal job would be, because I want to review it with those eyes. So, if you wanted to be in youth services, I want to look for certain things that are different than if you're going to be a project archivist. So you need to think about that. And sometimes people, I think, are so nervous about getting a job, they don't think about that. They don't think about what they would like to have. They just want a job. And I understand that. I understand financial stress. But because you can craft this discipline so many different ways, I think you owe it to yourself to try to craft your skills, your resume, your cover letter in a way that you will be able to obtain your perfect job. And so that's what we hope to do. And we've been creating some lists of alumni, and it's pretty impressive to see the jobs that our alumni are in. And so I want you guys to be part of that list at some time and be happy and fulfilled. You just spend too many hours at work. So that responsibility is really on you, but we can certainly help you with that. So I have an undergraduate degree in marketing research, and I think because of that, it's been easy for me to sort of define that some of the basic business principles that you guys need to apply in order to job hunt and prepare for job hunting. And so let's start with the things that you can do first and foremost. Really review job postings. So I happen to like Indeed.com because the terminology in our field is often appropriated in other professions. It's sometimes hard to use big sites like Monster.com. You get a lot of false hits that aren't exactly what you were looking for. So look at job postings and determine what kind of skills they have. So if you want to be a zoo librarian, look for zoo librarian positions. If you want to be a web archivist, look for that. The other thing is you want to look at regional differences in those job postings. I do tell people that if you're tied to Michigan, and where we are physically here in Detroit, we have 2 library science schools 45 minutes apart. It's a little harder for doing job hunting if you're tied right here because it's competitive. There are other states that have 0 library science programs, so it's a little bit easier to look for jobs in those areas. So keep those things in mind. Also, be aware that there's different cost of living in different regions, so something that sounds like a great job offer may not be the amount of money you can live on in New York City, but you can do just fine in South Dakota. So really keep that in mind. The other thing that we don't do that I hope we're going to do some exercises and work on this today is self-assessment. Who are you as an employee? What skills do you offer? And I think that our field, because we're service-oriented, we tend to attract, to be honest, a lot of very intellectually curious and very nice people, and hard workers for that matter too. However, a lot of times we're reluctant to brag. People think a lot of times that they're bragging in their resume or their cover letter, but you have to remember this person probably doesn't know you, and they're not psychic, so you have to spell out for them what your capabilities are and what you can do for them. And part of that is understanding who you are in order to write that. How can you differentiate yourself? How have you built your skills? Part of that is through participation. So you want to participate in things, and I just heard it on the radio again today, but I quote it all the time, right? They say 90% of success is showing up. You guys that showed up today, you're helping yourselves. And that is a big issue that we find in a lot of activities that we offer the school. We offer a lot of things for the students, and a lot of times they don't come, and I understand a lot of times they're working multiple jobs and things, but we offer you a lot of opportunities to network, to build your skills. And so you need to participate in that, even if it's not here, if it's in your local community, with your local historical agency, with your local library, whatever it is, local professional associations. You really need to do that. And part of that raises your visibility, but you also need to think about how you can do that. I often, when I'm grading papers, will see a paper that's really well done, and I'll say, you could re-edit this and submit it to the Regional Special Libraries Association newsletter. That rarely happens, though, so you need to think about raising your visibility. Publishing and presenting really raise your visibility. They show a certain professional commitment, so really consider that. I would say there's two main barriers for why I don't think our students do that enough. One is time, because most of our students have families or multiple jobs, and so they're trying to find time. The other thing is a lot of times that people that are new graduates or students think, well, I'm only a student or I'm new to the field, what would I have to offer? But I remind you, this is graduate school. I read a lot of really smart, thoughtful things in my papers for my students. You do have something to share. And if you have a thread of an idea from a paper you wrote or from a concept you couldn't find professional literature on, talk to an editor. Get familiar with how they do things. They need to fill their newsletters with content. They will be happy to talk to you. So they're actually way more approachable than you might perceive. So let's look at some job postings, and these are the things you want to think about. And what I say is think about it like you're writing an abstract for an article, okay? So think about how you want to break this apart and figure out what they're saying and what's important, right? Because you want to prioritize. So what trends do you see in there? What skills are they looking for? Do you have those skills? And how can you get those skills? So even if it's your ideal job, you've graduated, you want that job now, and you don't quite have those skills, start working on it. And there are free webinars out there that you can participate in. There's a lot of books out there for support. YouTube has a lot of initial tutorials that can get you started on things. Talk to other colleagues. Look at classes that are available. There's the MOOCs that are available. So you can gain access to that information pretty quickly these days to get that. The other question I get a lot of times is, I don't have everything in the job posting, so I didn't apply. Well, if you look at our job postings, they're pretty long in the tooth for how much they're asking for us, right? A lot of times they're asking for 20 skills. They probably are not going to find somebody with those exact 20 skills. So if you have 85% of those skills, I would apply. And make sure you make the case about what your skills are, how it matches it, and maybe even how you might gain the other skills, or if you have allied skills that are similar. Okay? So let's look at some job postings. This is one from Indeed. So the first one is a data librarian. Next one is project archivist, academic librarian, librarian, youth librarian, and part-time reference librarian. And this was purposefully a really broad search. So I just searched on the word librarian to see what would come up, and I was kind of surprised project archivist came up. But that gives you an idea of the breadth of our profession, right? So you really want to narrow that in and become an expert in something. So if we look at some of the details here, I opened one of the job postings, and this is for Broward College. And there's some things that they say, candidates should be enthusiastic librarians who address the needs of a 21st century learner. Okay? That is the position objective. So you want to address that in the cover letter. Okay? This is an 11-month faculty position. It's telling you that you work 5 days, 37 and a half hours, including evening and weekends. So you want to emphasize your ability to be flexible in hours, right? Successful candidate must have high level of computer literacy and commitment to library service. So they're really mentioning over and over again, okay, that they want somebody who's good with people, who gets that we are a service industry. So you want to make sure you express that. Not just tick off the list of skills they ask for, but look at the overall tone of the job posting so that that culture fits with who you are, right? So if you found some organization that was, their emphasis was really on making money, you would write it about that, how you were very financially adept, you understand about efficiency, etc. In this case, they're really looking for people that have the skills to deal with people and understand the service industry. So we need to make sure that you write to that, right? So make sure you're looking at the broad trends. Here's another one from Baylor College of Medicine, and it says expected functions and duties, evaluates and expects collection items, preserves collection, arranges, describes. So they're looking at traditional archival skills, but they're also looking at excellent communication, interpersonal organization, familiarity with presentation, and as it relates to archives, understanding intellectual property. So, and this is for a directorship, so you really have to know everything. So how do you capture that in 1.5 pages in a cover letter? It's a challenge. And so sometimes when they list so many skills, you might need to prioritize. So you might need to really emphasize, okay, overall they want service and they want leadership. So how am I going to exemplify that? And let maybe your resume speak to the technology issues that might be there, things like that. I have seen in a few instances some of our students have done something I thought was a little unique. I don't think it would work in every case, but it does work in some. When there's a lot of skills listed, I've had some people add a text box and list the skill listed, and then next to it, in the next column, list how they match that skill. That way the HR person can just eyeball it and see, skill for skill meets everything. This is great. So I wouldn't say that would work probably for everything, but it's an idea. If you have sort of a complicated job posting, it might be easy. And again, it's sort of like data visualization. It makes it really clear how your skills match what they're looking for. So, and of course, this goes on. This one is a librarian, the youth librarian position, and they are really emphasizing understanding youth, literature, collaborating with community groups, all of those things. So I think you really want to look at outreach or outreach capabilities. So if you have volunteerism, as part of your work aside from work experience, but you are involved in the community, that would be something you definitely want to highlight here. So worked with Girl Scouts, okay, did special events, planted a community garden. All of those things show your commitment to the community and that's in you and innate as a person. That would be very attractive to a potential employer. Self-assessment, the fun part, right? I ask people this all the time, so who are you? Right? How many people drew a blank when I say that? Right? Like, it's pressure. It's too much pressure. Who am I? And does your name pop into your head? Does the fact that you're a librarian or an archivist pop into your head? But what type of librarian or archivist are you? Are you a person that really is a strong processor? Are you strong in history? Are you strong with people? Are you really strong with research? All of the above. Are you a perfectionist, and how do you spin that in a positive way in your presentation about who you are? So think about your interests, right? So are you interested in history? Are you interested in matching resources to a person? Is that really fascinating for you? I've always said this job was really great because you got paid for learning. So people would come to the reference desk, they would ask you something you've never thought of, and then you would have to find the answer for them. And so you learned something new every day, and I thought that was a really fantastic, rewarding job. So is that something that interests you? Do people interest you? Does how information is presented interest you? So think about what interests you and what you're passionate about. You spend too much time at work not to really engage in a position. What is your personality like? Are you really outgoing and bubbly? And as I have a friend like this where I say she never meets a stranger, right? So everyone becomes a friend of hers. Are you a little quieter but have strong skills in technology? So think about making sure that position fits your personality and what you're going to be comfortable with and what you can excel for. I tell my students all the time, set yourself up for success. Right? So that doesn't mean taking 4 classes in a semester, okay? That means making sure that you pace yourself into something that's going to work for you. So what kind of skills do you offer? And what kind of skills would you like to develop? So think about that going forward. And career values. Does anybody know what I might mean about career values?
If you value diversity, or if you value open communication, and where you want to work someplace that you're collaborating, or things that you value professionally. And
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the nice things about if you work with projects or internships or volunteer somewhere at an information institution, it helps you to gel and figure out in a formative way, this is the type of place I want to work with information. So maybe you find out that you really want to work in corporate archives. Maybe you find out that you really want to work with children. Maybe you find out that you really want to work at a nonprofit, historical agency. So the values within each institution really matters, and the corporate culture of each institution really matters to whether you're going to be happy. So I tell people, remember when you're in a job interview that you're also interviewing them to see if you're going to be happy. As much as you all want a job, it's also really important not to take a job where within a month you think, I've made a horrible mistake. So you also can burn bridges that way. So try as best you can to sort of assess the situation. You can look, when you're looking through job postings, if you see kind of the same position posted every year for the same institution, and they don't seem to just be expanding, but it seems like turnover, that could be a red flag for you. So you want to make sure that the career values within that institution match, what your goals are. So, does anybody want to tell me what they have to offer? Friendly audience, right? So what would you have to offer? How would you define yourself? Yeah.
You were talking about volunteerism, and I've spent a good portion of my teenage through high school through college up until last year volunteering to supplement jobs that weren't always in my career path, but I wanted to be doing something.
Right.
So
great. And, that's really important because we are a service industry, to show that you're willing to donate time to make things better, to develop your community, to develop your skills, whatever it is. So that's something that's really can be highly valued in a resume. And that shows them that maybe it doesn't matter what time it says on the clock that you'll finish that reference, interview with someone, even if it takes you a half hour beyond your time, that you'll see it through and you'll be a good worker. So participation, I want to talk about a little bit more. There's lots and lots of ways you can participate. I will tell you the saddest thing I see is when I see a resume of a graduate who has not yet found a job, and their entire reference to the information profession is one line on their resume. It says MLIS. And there's nothing else on their resume that indicates they're in the information profession. And so one way to get around that, if you're not currently working in the field, is by participating in other ways. And you need to do this. And we say this at orientation. We say this at most contact. Many of your classes mention it. We say this on the SLIS list about opportunities. So the piece of paper you get with your diploma is worth something. That's a master's degree. But think about what you're dealing with. You're dealing with the public. You're dealing with fragile information. You're dealing with archival material, perhaps. And you need to establish yourself in the field with references. People can't just put anyone at a front reference desk. I can't just put anyone in an archive that holds George Washington's diary, right? We need to know you're going to show up, you're going to be responsible, that you're part of the field and you're a professional. And so you need to build those references in our field. You really do. So there's a lot of options. When I do see someone who didn't participate at all, and maybe they had a full-time job in another discipline and they just didn't make time for it. And though I understand that we warn against that, because once you graduate, it's harder to find time to volunteer or to explain why you want to volunteer. So it's a lot easier when you're a student. Student groups. We have fantastic student groups here that are always struggling for participation. We have a new student group, as a matter of fact, of people that are interested in youth services, and I'm really proud of them for starting that. All of our student groups people can participate from a distance and physically on site. Local professional associations. I was talking to a gentleman once who didn't have a job yet, and I said, you're not involved in your region at all. I said, you should really join such and such association in your region so that people know that you want to work in this field. And he said, well, why would I bother volunteering, going to meetings and things? And I said, so they know who you are. You need to make sure people know who you are. So, there's a regional special libraries association. There's a regional youth services group. There's a regional, Society of American Archivists. There's, all of those things. So you want to join something where people get to know you. There's regional ASIS, there's everything, and there's small, unique groups to regions. You need to be involved. Volunteer for a committee. Do something so people know you're responsible, you're willing to take responsibility, and they might refer you to a position going forward. So even if you're a graduate and you haven't done that, do that now. You have to get involved in the associations. It's the best way to build references and to get recommended for positions. It also builds your resume. You get involved in projects for that association. It doesn't mean you have to speak to every person at the meeting. It doesn't mean you have to get up in front of a group and speak. But you can work in a small committee to make something better for that group and for the profession, and that will build your resume. A lot of times in the regional, they have blogs. So that's a real great way to start out in publishing. So maybe write something about, might be something you start to research for a paper or something comes up in one of the meetings, do more research on it, and just say, I'd like to write a short blog. Don't forget, we have a blog here at SLIS, and we are always looking for alumni and current students to write about a project they worked on, something they volunteered on, whatever. So we have mechanisms for you to start. You can put a blog publication on your resume if it's professional. I have a lot of students that have at least one paper that's definitely publishable in their careers. You might need to edit it to meet the requirements of a publication, but you got the core there. So think about that. I mentioned contacting an editor, presented a poster, and a conference. We've been having more and more students and alumni do that, which is fantastic. But we could be doing a lot more. I hear so many great ideas every week. I see so many great things in the papers. I hear about students' passion about projects. We could definitely be doing more to increase visibility. The other thing is that connect with instructors. So one of the things with so many students online that some students and instructors both have kind of let this fall, and you need to take a more proactive stance, but send them an email if they're an instructor that is working in a research area you're interested in, and say, I'm really interested in this. Do you need any help with anything you're doing? They would probably welcome that. Also ask for guidance. Maybe they have ideas about how you can network in the field. Maybe they have a local contact for you no matter what your region you're in. But ask for guidance. Maybe they'll tell you about something specific you should read, an organization you should join. Ask them about anything in order to make that connection. Hands-on, so you can volunteer in an institution, certainly. Most places will not turn you down, and when I say volunteer, it doesn't mean 20 hours a week. Maybe it's 3 hours a week, okay? So 3 hours a week, you volunteer in an institution to build up your resume. Maybe you haven't been working in the field. Maybe you've been working as an academic librarian, but you think you might want to transition to public, volunteer at public. The only reason I'm aware of people getting turned down for volunteering is if there's a union contractual issue where you can't volunteers because there's a perception you're pushing somebody else out of a paying job. So that could come up, but for the most part, most volunteerism is welcome, especially with your educational level. So think about that. I always tell people, volunteer at an organization you would like to work at one day. That way they get to know you as a very helpful person. They'll get to see what kind of worker you are. And when something opens up, you're going to have the inside track on a position. We also have the Digital Media Projects Lab here, and I have projects running out of it all the time. So for our current students, we right now are doing some projects with the Burton Historical Collection here at Detroit Public Library, the MOCAD, which is our Contemporary Art and Design Museum, and we have just a lot of other things I could start up if I had more volunteers. So, you know, we have migration capabilities, obsolescent formats in there. We have digital preservation software. We have DSpace. We were trying to build an archive of the archive and library school. So the history, better build the history. So we're working on some things. And then again, talk to your professors about projects they might be working on. I know one of our professors got a grant earlier this year, and she was recruiting students to help her with the research. You know, that kind of avenue would be great to build your resume. And even if you graduated, look around for grants that have happened. You may be able to contact somebody that's administering a grant that needs some help. So, and it doesn't even have to be in your region. So visibility. Several of our students more and more are writing their own blogs that are fairly professional. So sometimes people are writing about their experiences in graduate school, their experiences as a new graduate. We have even some folks that are writing mid-career blogs about how the profession has changed. So that's all good, but remember, a potential employer might see it. I had one student once who referred me to her blog, and I thought it was fantastic. She was doing it. And in the first blog I read, she was being very negative about her current boss that was in the library. And I went back to her and I said, you have to stop this. And she said, oh, but I've got all this other stuff. And I said, yes, but a potential employer doesn't want to be your next victim in your next blog post, right? They don't want you to now be writing about them when you go there. So you really need to kill that. And she really hadn't thought about it that way for some reason. But really remember and filter whatever you're writing through a potential employer's eyes. The other thing you can do is just partner with other professionals, other classmates, other colleagues, people in that you might meet through not student associations, but professional associations. You know, work on publishing classwork, maybe work together on a project. Maybe I've seen great group projects come out of here, and I've often suggested that they publish them. Rarely happens, unfortunately, but there's a lot of great intellectual material and analysis that comes out of this program, and it's not meeting the general public. We're not getting it in our professional journals because we're not taking that step, and I think that's a real shame. So really think about that and find somebody that might want to mentor you and help you with that. So some of the faculty will do that. Even if you're a graduate, they're always interested in new information. Find another colleague through a professional association. We're a very friendly discipline, so really just try to network and meet people. And again, I'm not suggesting everybody has to be super extroverted at all. I'm giving you examples where you can just one-on-one contact someone, say I'm interested in this, and enhance your skills. So what outcome do we want to get to, right? You want to be prepared for the ideal job when it comes up. Now, when you happen to be looking for a job, your ideal job may not be open, but you want to continue to prepare for that because in 2 years, you might jump to that. It's always just a posting away. So I say continue to enhance your skills. We are a field that involves continuous professional development. That is not going to go away ever. I joke around with my neighbor who teaches in mathematics and gives the same lecture every single semester, and I have to change my lectures every single semester, that there's a huge difference in discipline, right? We really have to keep on top of things constantly. So you definitely want to be able to show a direction that you're moving in, right? So I have a lot of students who come to me and need a mentor. I hook people up with mentors. They will help you with that direction. You need to say you're taking these classes for a reason. You chose this paper topic for a reason because everything in the long run is for you to have this outcome so that you can get that great zoo librarian job, right? So you've got to move that way. You want to be able to show skills, okay? I just graduated with my MLIS, and it's one line in my resume. Why is that? What unique classes did you take? What unique skills did you get out of that? What fantastic paper did you write? I've had students that were applying for teen librarian positions and wrote a paper on reference in teen libraries, and it's not mentioned anywhere in their application materials. Why is that, right? Think about everything you've done. If you have ever in a job offered a process improvement that was adopted, include that. It's showing that you're a really good employee, that you're thoughtful, that you don't just do whatever they tell you, but you're thinking about how to make it more efficient, how to improve processes, how to make it better for your patrons. Make sure you improve those things. And I know it's sometimes hard to think about that because you're just doing, you're living your life day to day. But maybe, you came up with a really great idea for an empty lot to become a community garden. That's proactive, and you recruited volunteers. Guess what? We work with volunteers a lot. That you got a little publicity for it. Guess what? We need publicity to advertise our programming. Think about all of these things that you do in your day-to-day life that are portable and skills for potential jobs. They also show initiative. I will tell you that if an employer gets several resumes and one is okay and another one is equally okay but shows initiating of projects, the initiator is going to be much more likely to get that position. So they need people that are going to be great employees and show new projects, establish new technologies, reach out to the community better. So that's something they would really love. That you're ready for the job. I am so pleased that my practicum reviews, I do the practicums for DCM and for archives as well as the alternate spring break. The reviews I get back from these employers are fantastic. I get comments like, best student experience I've ever had. From the employers saying our students are so good. And I believe that to be true, but I need you guys, right, to show that off and to believe that in your applications materials. That's got to be there somewhere. You need to say, I am ready for this job, right? I have this, this, and this. You need to build a network. Colleagues are important. Fellow students that you meet in graduate school will be your future colleagues. It really helps. And I know building a network has helped me greatly because students come to me and ask me a question about something, and I'm able to find someone at least who knows someone who can help them, even in different regions, even to find a mentor. And that's been really vital to me being able to help you guys. And that is vital for anyone in service to really have some kind of network you can turn to in order to solve problems. Reference list. I have a lot of people that don't think about the reference list until they graduate or they're just about to apply for jobs. You need to build that. Ideally, if you're a new graduate or still in school, I would say I'd like you to have at least one faculty reference. And I know people talk about that a lot, that they're a little nervous about that because if they take all online classes, they don't feel maybe like they've connected as much. But that's on you. You need to make sure you make those connections. Especially if you've had a faculty member twice, they should know you, and they should be able to be a reference for you. So send them notes about what you're doing. Tell them that a certain lecture was interesting to you because, and could they give you more information? Establish those linkages. If you have been out, graduated for a while, you don't necessarily need to have a faculty member anymore, but make sure your references are all professional. I don't want to see a character reference. I don't want to see your brother-in-law in there. They don't care about that. They want to see librarians, archivists, information professionals on your reference list, and that's another reason you need to build your network. Okay, and through these hands-on experiences, that's where you can do that. You can now have a cultural institution on your reference list because you volunteered 3 hours a week to scan MoCAD exhibit catalogs. But they know that you showed up every time, you did a good job, you offered suggestions, you labeled everything correctly, you're competent. People ask me in submission information, what's important to communicate? right? So your past work history, how far back do you go? I get people that tell me what they did in high school. Okay, that's a little too far back. Even if you worked in the local library, in the public library or school library, most of the time that's too far back because it wouldn't be considered very professional because you were so young. Your GPA, unless you're applying to certain government jobs or you're having to fill out a traditional job application like you would to work in a store, most people do not care about your GPA. So that doesn't matter. If you really want to include it because you're proud of it, that's fine. But it is not something that is important. And our director will tell you the same thing. What's important is the skills you have, and you need to spell that out. Okay? High school graduation date. This is an issue on many ends of the spectrum. For one thing, most people just don't feel comfortable with them and potential employer figuring out exactly how old you are. And that could be because you're so young, they might think you don't know enough. It could be because you're in mid-career and they may think you're not hip enough. So, there's prejudice many ways. The way the trend is now is that high school and college graduation dates, a lot of those dates are not necessary to include anymore. So you can really throw that out the window. I know when I graduated, you had to have everything spelled out and where you were everywhere. And if you were unemployed for 3 months, why was there a gap? And, it's crazy. People are more realistic now. They know people take time off for families. They take time off for caretaking. And that's part of our society. And so sometimes you're just including the jobs that are pertinent to that position. And you're not including the fact you worked at Starbucks on the side for a while, too. So think about that. But along those lines, skills that are appropriate to that particular job, you might want to include Starbucks because it's customer service, and that is valuable in our field. So, and maybe you don't need to put every single customer service job that you had, but you could even include in the cover letter, cumulatively 6 years working with customer service. So they know you know how to deal with a problem patron, right? If you've taught anything, volunteered in a volunteer capacity, Girl Scouts, whatever, that's important. Instruction is an important part of our field, so you can include that. If you worked as in technology, right? Any kind of technology, that's important in our field. So think about skills from other positions or volunteer organizations that you would want to definitely emphasize. Again, what kind of employee are you going to be? Work ethic, what's your work ethic and style? They're going to ask you questions about that. So, do you work well in groups? Can you make decisions? Can you show initiative and work on your own with little supervision? So you get these kinds of questions, and that is something that you may need to convey in the application materials. We all have known people that couldn't make a decision at all, and you want to make sure you say, yes, I can make a decision, but an educated decision based on, your processes, your procedures. So you need to be able to convey that based on what you see in the job posting. And your attitude. I've had people come in to job interviews with incredibly negative attitudes, and through the whole thing I thought, if I hire this person, they're going to bring the entire department down, right? They're going to just pull it down. And one of the things I learned being a manager, I had my own multimedia archiving company for a long time, is that negativity is incredibly contagious. Being positive, not necessarily so. Okay, so your tools, right? Your cover letter. Now I mentioned I'm happy to look at them. I'm happy to look at different incarnations. You should be changing that for each job posting. Remember, job hunting is a full-time job, so it is a lot of work. Your resume you may change for every job as well. The interview, and I do a workshop specifically on interviewing, so if you're interested, I'll be doing one of those in the spring. Your references. This question comes up on references a lot. Should I contact my references for every job I apply for? What about reference letters? couple things that I like to offer about that is it is nice to let them know, but if you're generally job hunting, I think that for the most part, in most references, unless they say otherwise, you can let them know you're applying for these types of positions, that they are on your reference list. Is that okay? If they want to be contacted about every job, that's fine. It is nice to give them a job description, let them know they may be contacted by this organization, and your latest resume so they can really speak to your skills. I mean, that is optimal if you can. And I have several graduates, new graduates, who have been doing that with me. So I had somebody call me the other day. I picked up the phone and they said, I'm so-and-so from so-and-so. And I said, oh, yes, he told me he was going to call you, or that you might call me. And, you know, it was very smooth because of that. So it was very professional. But the other thing is reference letters. I would strongly encourage you to try to get reference letters. Even though most of the time they're not asked for nowadays, having someone else say hire him or her aside from you is powerful. And if it's someone in the profession, we're a very small profession, a lot of us know each other. If I say, oh, Bob Holly recommended her, you know, that means something. So sometimes I think it's fine to attach reference list and reference letters with your submission material, even if they haven't asked for it yet. Now you're going to have to read that your own. To me, it shortcuts a step. So the employer does not have to ask for that. You have glowing letters of recommendation already. You're differentiating yourself from others. I can't tell you that everyone that would receive a packet that way might be irritated because they didn't ask for a reference letter. I can't speak to that. And that's the hard part about career advising. But for me and many other employers I've spoken to, it's a really good way to get more supporting information out about yourself right up front. So it's something to consider. But ultimately, you're the one that has to feel comfortable with what you submit and how you submit it. The other thing about reference letters is that generally references like to write them to that specific job. So if you're applying for 20 jobs all over the country, many of your references are too busy to write 20 letters. So we're running into this problem nowadays with this. So you can ask your reference if they would agree to write sort of a generic letter, not to that position, but saying that I can speak to, you know, Lauren's UX skills, and she did this and this with me, and and hire her. So I would say that, because I would say, I'm not going to say hire this person for any type of information management job you would ever apply for, but I'm going to say I would hire her based on this. And that's the type of jobs that you're applying for that works perfectly. And that gets out of the time commitment for your references. Not everybody's going to say yes to do that, but some people might feel comfortable, and that way you have something you can include. People ask me if you should send follow-up thank you cards after an interview. And that's hard because sometimes actually people will say, I don't send any follow-up. So you have to follow that if that's their preference. But if not, there is also an opportunity to really show them your skills. And one of the ways you can do that is, for instance, I had a friend who had an interview at an archive, an automotive archive, and afterwards she wrote a handwritten thank you card, and she went to Henry Ford Museum and got note cards with cars on them and sent it to them. So it was a car archival oriented thank you card. So, you know, it was a nice way to sort of close that. So it was really thoughtful. And the other thing with follow-up, and this is sneaky, but I'm telling you my sneaky thing to do in job interviews that's worked for me for years, is sometime during that interview, and I'll talk about this more in the interview workshop, sometime during that interview, there will be an informational question that will come up. And you are an information professional, so whether you happen to know more about it than they do because you did a paper on it, or you talked about it in class, or you worked on it at your old job, or whether you feel the need to research it after the interview and find good information, put that in your follow-up card, okay? So, or email, whatever you choose to do. I still think handwritten cards are different, and show more effort. But, so you are then showing them as an information professional, right? I heard an information need. I am sharing with you an answer to that need. I'm remembering that this need came up, and I'm following through by sending you this information. It's a really great way to show them how you were listening, you are strong in information research, and closing the loop there. So what to communicate? A clear picture of who you are as an employee. Really important. And people lose sight of this because it's so hard to look at a resume and cover letter that's about you and you're so close to it. I get lots of resumes every year that are fabulous resumes for a different discipline, not for an information-related one. It's from their previous career. And so they have, all of their history at being a lawyer or a teacher, and then at the top they put MLIS, and that's it. Nothing else has changed. Well, they need to rework the resume to reflect that of not an undergraduate student in history, not a lawyer, not a teacher, but an information professional. So you can still take a lot of that content, you just need to rework it and emphasize how you are managing information in those other positions or that other degree or whatever. So you really have to make sure you think about, okay, remember, who am I now? I am an information professional. I'm no longer a school teacher. How am I going to present myself as an information manager? Maybe because you were already migrating this way, as a school teacher, you were helping in the school library. You were helping with database development. You were on the curriculum committee for advising for additional informational resources. Think about these things and pull those things in. Be careful of your informal social networking commentary that's out there. Employers do check that a lot of times now. So it's okay to have your social media under a different name or a nickname so that it's not tracked down. Okay, so your clear picture includes skills for that job posting. Not a different job posting, that one. I don't care how tired you are, you've got to write it for that job posting or don't write it. Okay, it's got to mean something to that institution. Your education that's relevant. So, like I said, if you took a teen reference class and you're applying for a teen reference librarian position, make sure there's a connection there. Projects related. I can't tell you how many great group projects and other projects that have active links that I don't see on students' resumes, or graduates, I should say. There's active links out there of content that you guys have done. I don't see any reference to it on your resumes a lot of times. Make sure you're including that. Those projects show, and all the studies show, that employers want to see you can apply what you've learned in the classroom. These hands-on projects are how you do that. So make sure if you've done one, you've got it out there. If it is not public or it is no longer public, make sure you screen grab that as soon as it goes public so you can use it in the future. At the very least, if it's something that's not you don't own and you're not hosting, then maybe it's a Detroit Public Library and maybe it'll be a dead link in 5 years or in 2 years when you're applying for a job again. So make sure you've got some screen grabs at least of it to show what you did and describe it. Professional commitment, I'm going to keep mentioning that until people get more comfortable with it. We have, through NDSA, we've taken 8 people at a time to a national conference to present. They did a fabulous job with standing room only, got fabulous feedback. It was fantastic. It's a shame more students don't take advantage of that. It was really nice. And these kinds of things do shortcut your job hunting time. Time and time again we see this. And you want to communicate your work stability. So, 6 years in customer service, very oriented to understanding individual collections, whatever it is. Understand that you have to communicate what kind of personality and skills and diligence you would give to an institution. Okay, this is really tiny, so for those in the room, I'll highlight some things. So here's another job posting I want to read. So here, this is a job posting that says full-time, 37.5 hours, includes days, evenings, and weekends. Essential duties include provide reference assistance, reader's advisory, collection development, leading, conducting programming, planning programming, operation of the computer lab, processes interlibrary loan requests. What kind of job is this? It's kind of a catch-all. It sounds like you're the pinch hitter. You do whatever needs to be done, right? So what kinds of skills would you need to express, or what kind of attitude would you need to express in a cover letter for this kind of job? Flexibility. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep, you will do whatever needs to be done. So you can reprioritize throughout the day. They're mentioning that you might have to work days, evenings, and weekends. So you might want to mention that you have no problem with that if you have no problem with that. Master's degree in library science, experience in youth services, comprehensive knowledge of library-related processes, current media for youth, existing collections, community interest, ability to work well with others, ability to make judgments while following established and prescribed procedures, problem-solving skills, and ability to meet deadlines. What does this tell you? What kind of person are they looking for? What kind of work ethic? Strong interpersonal and communication skills there, right? They're looking for somebody who's a grown-up. So you need to express to them that you're a grown-up, okay? So, and here's a little thing I was doing. So what it says, job description, right? And what they really want, a flexible employee that is willing to take on potentially inconvenient hours. Also willing to take on many aspects of librarianship and be a catch-all for many arenas. Needs computer skills, people skills, time management skills, and traditional library skills. A can-do person with a positive, action-oriented demeanor will go far, is what I said. Okay? So that's who you want to be. I had a student who was complaining they couldn't find a job once, and he told me he was applying for a job and they asked for his transcript, but he didn't send it because it sounded like too much trouble. And I looked at him, I said, but do you understand what message you just sent them? And he said, what? And I said, you're supposed to be a can-do person. You're supposed to be a person who's going to help them out. If you can't follow the directions in the application, there's no way you're going to get the job. And he just said, oh, I didn't think about it that way. I think he was just burned out in job hunting. But I can imagine the image he was conveying in his process. He was doing himself in, really not helping himself. So here's another interpretation. So what they really want, when we were talking about youth services, etc., is they want someone to show professional commitment, prefer that they have shown professionalism in another environment first, because they were asking for a little bit of experience, understanding the content and communication of the position, make intelligent decisions without need to be watched all the time, and will be respectful to coworkers. Okay? So those are the things that translates to. Keywords or phrases, right? Dependable is good, works well with others is good, so respectful, flexible, literate, technology skills, decisive, independent, and I put hip on there. And the reason I did is partly because the stereotypes we deal with in libraries and archives is that, to the greater public, is that, you know, we're old world or we're not hip or we don't use the technology. Obviously, if you go into library archives, you will find that's not true. But it's also important that we are staying current with our skills, and you need to convey that. That hip energy, that up-to-date energy is really important for employers because we're constantly finding the stereotype. So they need to hire people that don't fit that stereotype so that we can continue to engage the community in innovative ways and get people in our doors, or at least into our servers. So cover letter. Illustrate your dependable nature by mentioning longevity at a profession. So maybe you are transitioning from retail, and so you don't really want to note every retail experience you've had over a 15-year period, but you can say you've worked in retail for 15 years in the cover letter. Or maybe you want to say you worked for 6 years, at Macy's. That's fine. That shows some stability. Okay? Customer service, I mentioned, is important to mention. Class projects or papers, site group projects. Give examples of your initiative, problem solving, and flexibility. I tell people this all the time. Even if you're working as a library clerk right now, add in things that you've done for programming. Add in program process improvements. Add in how you've dealt with a problem patron. So make sure you're thinking about the more advanced things that you have done, not just that you're checking in and reshelving books. You're more than that. What else have you done? Point out a few key technology skills as appropriate for the posting. Resumes. I've mentioned some of this already, so make sure it's not one line in your resume. Be sure that your resume covers every aspect of the job that you're applying for. It's okay for your resume and your cover letter to go over a page if you have the skills to support that. Okay? If it's a really long job posting, you can't possibly cover it in a page. By the time you get the header in there, right, it doesn't leave you much space. So it's okay. I wouldn't go to a full 2 pages for a cover letter. There are some students and graduates I see that they have 2 full pages of resume, and it needs to stay at 2 pages. And maybe they're at a point where they're applying for supervisory positions, so that might be one aspect. So that's okay. Maybe you have some publications you have to include. So you do not and should not, at a master's level, have a 1-page resume. We want to really build it beyond that. There's too many skills they're looking for in our field. So here's some translation I do. Sometimes I feel a little bit like a journalist when I'm talking to people and giving them career advice, because they might write, Macy's sales associate, 2008 to present, sorting clothing, putting up sales item, answering customer questions. But I would rewrite it as successfully managed customers' needs in increasingly tough economic period, received increasing responsibility for customer service and the maintenance of products, received service awards including Employee of the Month 3 times. Okay? Which sounds better for a potential employer, right? But we don't think of it that way because, again, you're living your day-to-day life, but you've got to think about that. What awards did you get there? What proves that you're ready to move into information science? Okay, for interview, and we cover this in the workshop more so, be sure to prepare stories about how you tackled a tough issue. People haven't done this. I had Kathy Russ from Troy Public Library and I were talking one day. I spoke in her class, and she said, our students are not interviewing well. She said, I will ask them questions, and they look at me like, I had no idea you were going to ask me why I want this position. Okay? That's typical. People are going to ask you why you want this position. Okay? People are going to ask you why you want to work there. People are going to ask you, what's your strength? What's your weakness? It's really important to start thinking about that and have some anecdotes packed away of ways you solved problems and saved the day. Okay? It's your Dudley Do-Right story, so you need to come up with those. And we all have them. You just might need to think about it a little while. Okay? Talk about how you were dependable or flexible. Use discretion, respect in dealing with people. Successfully implemented or used a tough technology. All of these things are great things for a potential employer to hear. Follow-up is sometimes difficult, so I mentioned kind of tying that all in together. Top mistakes. Not really reading the job posting. You cannot have a standard list of skills, and it is time-consuming. I know it's reiteration, but references from other disciplines. I see this a lot, and I'm hoping these aren't making it out to to potential employers, but I see references for, engineering. And that's wonderful that you had great references when you were an engineer, but you need to have great references to be an information professional. So you need to hone those. Interviewing without listening. This is a problem because in your mind, there's skills that you want to make sure you get out in that interview and you don't want to forget those. And so sometimes people sort of rattle through the interview and they don't slow down to listen to the actual question that's being asked, and they answer in the wrong way. So remember, when you're interviewing, you can take a pause. It's okay. It's not as long as it seems in your head. Because your brain works quickly, and it's better to come out with a better answer than a quick answer. Please don't stress negative issues. Try to follow up with organizations to say thank you for your time, and really just not networking. I would say that's our biggest mistake on the part of our students, is just not being involved, participating, and creating that network to support you when you're job hunting. It really makes a difference. Okay. Now we're doing this little exercise. So I'm going to leave this on the screen for a while for those that are online. And for those in person, you have handouts. So I wanted to list 3 positive qualities about yourself that you would want to share with employers. So what are the top 3 strengths that you have? Okay, so think about that. And you can't be really generic. So don't use detail-oriented. We kind of overuse that in our field, right? That's kind of given. If you got an MLIS, you've got to be detail-oriented to some extent, right? So be more specific. So you have you understand how to bring a community into an institution. You have great connections in the community. You have strong research skills in what kind of databases or what kind of formats, whatever it is. So think of 3 things. So one of the things I would probably say is I'm good at connecting a community with the cultural institution. And that's partly because I know so many people. But I'm good at seeing an information need in an institution and figuring out how the public can help, or the public should need to see this great collection. So that's something that I would bring to the table, that I make those connections. And it's not traditional, maybe information, but it's definitely outreach. So that's something that I would say in an interview, just to give you an example. Okay, next one. Accomplishments. Anything that leads to professional qualities, right? So maybe it is that you like professional development and you've been certified in XYZ and you plan to continue on that. Maybe it's that you you like to develop new programming, and here's an example. Maybe it's that you have been able to do some unique research that helped an institution. Okay, remember me. You want to reinforce, and this might be the end of your interview, this might be the end of your cover letter, this might be sort of the language and the way you mention things in your resume, but what is it that you want them to take away from that discussion with you or that review of your resume? So what are the 3 things you want to convey? And maybe it is that you are going to be innovative with technology. Maybe it is that you are going to have strong interpersonal skills that will create better outreach with the community. Maybe it's that you have creativity with programming. So think about what is it that you would want them to take away from having contact with you for that job position. Okay, last one. Hope this hasn't been too painful. Unique skills. What are additional skills that you might have? And maybe you don't have 3 yet, but maybe you want to get to 3. But are there any other unique skills that you offer that might be of benefit to them? But think about what it is that you could offer that would differentiate yourself from others. So if you and 30 other potential librarians or archivists were in the job pool, what differentiates you from those other 30? Okay? Maybe it's that you really love people. Maybe it's that you have a deeper background in history than the average person, or maybe it's that you're applying for women's studies librarian and you have an undergraduate degree in women's studies and you have more depth than the average person applying for the job. So these unique skills will change depending on the job, but you need to know who you are and value who you are so you can convey that in your application materials. So I just have an example here. So the Katie brand, right? So what brand are you, right? So I made up a Katie brand. So project directed, I've got a history of developing projects and seeing them through. Collaborative, shown strength in working with all student groups to hold annual joint meeting. Understanding of technology applications, broad exposure to applications, but ability to evaluate and recommend when best to use technology. This is a big thing for me. I'm constantly telling people that evaluating technology for optimal use is much more important than knowing everything that's out there. You've got to understand why you would want to use a technology and what it will do for you. Strong communication skills, was able to successfully work with a long-term problem patron, Excellent writing skills includes Best Student Paper Award in graduate school. How many of you even knew we had such an award? We do. Sometimes no one applies. So make sure you take advantage of these opportunities. Accomplishments, right? Conceived and implemented senior citizens outreach, including 1950s movie night. Okay, I totally made this all up. Genealogy training and basic computer workshops. More than 50 people participated. These are the kinds of things you want to think about. Created standard procedures for using social networking tools in my local library. Acted as team leader and moderator for a student project. Worked to obtain team cohesiveness in a very polarized group. Successfully wrote and presented a paper resulting in an A. What does that really say, right? You had a problem group, and you guys held it together, okay? And you helped to do that. That's reality. Everything's collaborative. It shows really a strong excellence in collaboration, which is the real world, right? Remember me. Understands outreach needs in both traditional and new ways. Strong communicator and patron interactions. Positive problem solver. Unique skills. Strong history of community involvement. Enhances ability to recognize community needs. Leadership roles in community, including managing volunteers. Personal involvement in social media tools assist understanding of their place in information outreach. Okay? So that's my contact information. It's really important that you think about who you are so that you can verbalize that in some way and get that on paper. So please know I'm here to work with you. I have office hours on Mondays from 12:30 to 2:30, but I'm around a lot and I can meet with you other times. And I'm happy to evaluate multiple versions of resumes and cover letters. I have worked with folks that are applying for academic librarian positions and they need to do a presentation, so I've worked with them with their PowerPoints and let them, present to me. So I'm around. I'm busy, but I can make time to see everybody every week, so we'll work out scheduling. I would like to just see what other questions you have and also know that I'm open to suggestions for other activities we engage in to help you guys. Yeah.
I have a lot of questions, but I'll try and pick just a few here. So in the beginning, you mentioned that you want to narrow in, become an expert. Do you have any advice on how to not narrow in so much that you are perfect for like 10 jobs?
Right.
And
well, that's the definite give and take. I have a lot of discussions with students about that. Some students are trying to go very broad so that they'll be as marketable as possible. And some students just know what they love and they want to narrow in. And how does that translate? And I would say that you should narrow in to something that you can become an expert in, but that doesn't mean every resume has to be that narrow. You can write it more broadly so that you're more attractive to more general positions. But then when your ideal job comes up, you're ready for it and you can apply for it in certain specific skills. The way our field is, it is huge and broad now. And everyone is going to have to narrow in because you can't know everything. So to an extent, that's just inevitable. And so you might as well embrace that and figure, I'm going to become an expert in something. And maybe that only takes you doing some extra research and writing in some areas or taking a few extra classes to do that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be here at the School of Library Information Science. It can be extra technology classes, those kinds of things. So, but I there's just too much to know. So you have to be able to say I'm something, and librarian is sort of too broad now. I mean, there's just too much to know. So I'm a UX librarian. I'm a web librarian. I'm adult services. You kind of have to position yourself. And that doesn't mean you can't have multiple specifications that you write different resumes for different jobs. But I think inevitably, because there's so much, you have to. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Other question?
So a question I had prepared beforehand. In terms of references, I always extremely shy to ask for references because I don't want to bother them. And I've always used references I try to use my current employer because I figure, well, they'll be able to speak, you know.
To your current skills.
Right, right. But even though they're not, like right now I'm a gardener, so it's not like a professional position. So do you want your most
that's people
recent,
skills
or?
and that's research right there. You know, so those skills are portable to our profession. You need to grow references in our profession, though. You really do. The only time I've turned down people for a reference is, you know, I've had people who really failed to turn in assignments for me and wanted me to act as a reference, and that's, you know, you don't want me to be a reference in that case. You know, it's because I would have to tell the truth, and that's that you weren't, you know, consistent. But you need to go over that, especially the faculty. They're used to being asked, you know, so, you know, just make sure they get to know you a little bit. You know, don't in the first class session say, will you be my reference? You know, let them get to know you. But you need to grow that, and that's why you need to do some of these hands-on projects and grow that network. It's good for you. It's character building.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
And so how, for example, a lot of like the scholarships are due in March, the applications. When would be a good time to ask for recommendations for projects or scholarships or
I would
things
say
like
in
that?
January I would start building those. I think some of the scholarships are due even before that. I want to say it might be a little earlier than March, but maybe I'm wrong. They might have changed it for this year. Yeah, but
So,
definitely
2 months.
developing those soon. Anybody else? Thank you guys. I hope this was helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.